So we're just getting it ready for a final check before we proceed with the meeting. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Hopefully this is working and we can proceed. I'm just going to get a final nod. Okay, we're streaming. The meeting is now on. Good evening. Welcome to members of the public, people at home listening, returning panel members and new panel members. Good to see you. There are no planned practice evacuations for this evening, but if the alarm does sound, please make your way down one of the main staircases and find yourself in the car park at the back in St Runwald Street, where further direction would be given. This meeting is being streamed live. We have an audio recording for posterity that will also be available on demand in the future. Discreet use of mobile phones and other tech is okay, but please turn them to silent. We don't want them going off and making a noise. If we have to break at 7:30, we will, subject to the progress of the meeting. I am Councillor Darius Laws. I am a councillor for Rural Ward North, and I am the chairman of this panel. I'm going to start over there on the far left for introductions, please.
Councillor Mixbinder, Shrubbin Ward.
Councillor Appleton, Highwoods Ward.
Councillor Faith Smalls, Old Heath, The Hive and Rowhedge, substituting for Councillor Lee Sordis.
Councillor Jocelyn Law, Highwoods Ward.
Councillor Thomas Rowe, Rural North Ward.
Lucy Bredman, Strategic Director and Support to the Board.
Dennis Willets, Lexton and Braeswick Ward.
Owen Howell, Democratic Services Officer.
Thanks everyone. We've had some substitutions announced there. We've got Councillor Smalls here. Sad to see you leave the panel permanently, but nice to see you again, substituting for Councillor Scordis and Councillor Spindler for Councillor Muffet. Okay, we have no urgent items. We have declarations of interest. Do I see any? Is that an urgent item?
Oh, that was declaration of interest.
Okay, good, right. You had me very worried. Declaration of interest, go for it.
Yes, I see that on Work Plan Community 360 is listed, and I am a former employee of Community 360.
Thank you very much. Anything else? Anyone else wish to declare? Okay, fantastic. Item 5, minutes. No minutes to approve at this meeting. Item 6, general have your say. I've had 2 expressions of interest to come and have your say, which is great. We welcome public engagement. First of all, I've got Mr. Sunan Sayed. Did you wish to come and have your say this evening? Thank you, great. Step up to the table, please. And in your own time, when you're comfortable, hit the button, and you've got 3 minutes to talk to us. We will then respond, and if you need to respond to that, you can. It's fine. Go for it.
Good evening, Scrutiny panel. I've sent a few emails to Owen Howell and Robert Carmichael regarding the kind of appointed architects and community consultation procedures that are sort of, I don't know if they're actually officially any kind of policies or protocols. And I've been invited onto the residents panel to speak about this. I've got 20 years in architecture, so I'm really looking at it from that perspective than just a sort of homeowner. And this evening I have illuminated 8 projects that I have been invited to sort of contribute to, and obviously I can't speak about 8 projects in 2 minutes, so I've already sent the list to the democratic officers. So I'm just here this evening to speak about the Natural History Museum, which is in the All Saints Church, and the Castle Parks Children's Playground, which I know had a community consultation in 2010, and then we're going to have one now. So I'm just curious to know if there is some sort of methodological kind of consultation process, because you're dealing with 2, 3, 4 different types of sectors of society, let's say. It's like, you know, going to a dentist and then just trusting that they're going to sort of heal your teeth and not really knowing. And so when appointed architects and developers are having these consultations, it's important that they, what's that bell telling me? Okay. So it's just important that the visual communication during a community consultation is quite clear. And the sort of point in case is the Natural History Museum, because there's 4 boards there at the moment, and they're covering up the beach and the rocks and stuff like that. So there are 4 presentation boards, and I'm just here to say, why is it we're not able to appoint high quality design teams? Why are they not really kind of giving us very detailed survey drawings? Why are they not looking at the bigger plan? Why are they not looking at the wider community? Is that because the city council is just sort of going with the flow? I don't know. That's what I just kind of here to illuminate, really. And I've sent that in the emails. Okay, is that enough?
Thank you. Thank you for making that contribution. Look, if it's helpful, some of the regeneration projects that are happening within Colchester Centre, as I understand it, have been sort of bracketed together under this Towns Fund project. So there's been lots of opportunities at all sorts of stages, cross-party, public engaged as well, to talk about how we can basically exploit the opportunities around selling it and selling it a bit better. And I've personally spoken up and said, you know, there should be bigger and better hoardings, and we should be a bit proud about saying that actually Colchester won this money. I know I'm deviating a little bit because you're talking about natural history, which is not in Towns Fund, but the point remains. So I think given your professional background, if you're going to regenerate major historic buildings, you should shout about it. And I've seen other examples, for example, in the city of Lincoln, where you have gigantic hoardings that have got the city council, the county council, the government logo on, saying we are proactively regenerating these sites. So I think the sentiment of what you say is absolutely spot on. We should be doing as much as is possible, even if just to tell people, we're really sorry about how long it's taken St Nicholas Square to get done. There's been some problems with this. This is what's happening. And I think the message has got through. I know that some of the economic generation team have made some hoardings happen. So at the townhouse, for example, I've seen them with my own eyes. And I'm sure we're going to see huge ones outside Jumbo eventually. That's just my 2 pennies on the hoarding thing. But I think the sentiment you're coming from is actually bang on. And I just wonder if Democratic Services want to jump in there procedurally around some of the correspondence that you've been involved with, because other than me stating that there's obviously a planning protocol and any community engagement has an opportunity within the existing frameworks, I don't know if you're aware of anything in addition to that that might be useful for this moment.
I'm afraid I don't know.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Do feel free to come back.
So, for example, with the Natural History Museum, which isn't in the Town Fund, that obviously opened in 1958. So that's a 1950s perception of how we exhibit natural history and wildlife. And then in the 70s, it was further upgraded. And then in 2007 to 9, it was awarded a Wolfson Foundation along with DCMS, which is now changed, Department of Innovation. So that was 50,000, and that opened in 2010. And then nothing's happened till 2021. And then we have appointed, when I say we, I mean as a society, we have appointed architects, London Ipswich-based architects, who have missed all this kind of stuff. And it's obviously in All Saints Church, which is one of the most historic. So when you do community consultations, it's like having a menu and saying to someone, right, there's carrots and there's potatoes and there's peas, what do you want to do with it? Rather than actually give them a buildable solution. And that's where I just kind of I'm curious as to why it's just a bit wishy-washy, and hence we didn't secure funding for Natural History Museum. So that's the example I'm speaking about.
Okay. I might suggest, or unless anyone else wants to chip in here, that you do share this with the leader of the council, because these are, as you say, these are our assets, whether it's Holy Trinity or whether it's All Saints, whether it's a town, Jumbo, they're kind of our assets now, aren't they, as a city, and we've got an opportunity to steer that. So I would say share it with the leader. I'm not a planning expert. I can't add much more value than that. Does anyone else have anything they wish to say, or can I proceed? Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Syed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have a public contribution from Mr. Nick Chilvers. Welcome. You know the protocol, although it has changed a little bit, but it shouldn't affect you.
Thank you, Chairman. Scrutiny panel. Colchester Commercial Holdings Limited. Now, no need to explain about it to me. I've read its aims, who they are, and how they're governed. What I'd like to know is who scrutinises it, who's in charge. In 2023 report, there were 5 directors that met quarterly. Well, my church PCC meets monthly. According to Companies House, there have been 25 directors since 2018. Now, that's a high turnover, and sort of here today, gone tomorrow. Why is that? Not much board stability or oversight for a £5 million operation, is it? The range of work, projects and impact on the city seems to be spreading. Okay, but it is with public money. Who shoulders some of the risk? Who heads the departments? Who agrees the work stream? Who pulls the strings? We can all see who the leadership is, leadership team for Colchester Council, and charities like C60, 360. Why not CCH? References made in the financial results on page 20, the highest paid director receiving 128k. Right, no problem with that. Presumably that's a full-time director. But who? When things go wrong, for example, like failing to ensure contractors properly manage moves on and off the lower park in the rain, we get a council spokesman coming out with a line, well, we work closely with the event operators to preserve the ground, etc., etc. Well, not that close, did they? They should have been all over that like a rash. It was obviously going to be a sensitive job, so they should have used belt and braces. The attitude seems to be, well, it's covered by insurance and the grass will grow back, so that's all right then. That spokesman should have been a named executive from Amphora event section. At least them take some responsibility. Starts to look as if they're bulletproof from top to bottom. And going back to the park issue, some sort of apology wouldn't have hurt from the events company. If Colchester Commercial Holdings wants to avoid negative comment, it needs to be more transparent about its management and what it's up to. Now, I presume the next annual report will go to Cabinet. I've watched the previous one. Well, that was a light touch, a bit like marking one's own homework. I know a handful of councillors have raised queries about the value of some projects. They didn't get far. In my opinion, it needs proper scrutiny by this committee with pre-notified questions for CCH Chair and Chief Officer. Otherwise, how do taxpayers know we're getting best value? Does this committee have the powers to probe this arm-length company or not? Can CCH be put on your committee's work schedule, since the schedule is on the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chilvers. Of course, the City Council owns CCHL. I get that. There was aspirations some years ago for it to become a vehicle to make phenomenal amounts of money, and perhaps it hasn't quite made phenomenal amounts of money, but it does serve as a vehicle, for example, for the events as you've described. To the point you made very specifically about accountability when things go wrong, and putting a name to a quote when the Castle Park has been churned up, I think that's a totally legitimate point. I think putting your hands up when something goes wrong and having a named or at least an organisation own it is the right thing to do. So I'm sure the leader who is at home probably listening to this right now will hear those sentiments, and I hope so. In terms of the overall scrutiny of it, I don't see why not within certain parameters, but ultimately at the moment, it is an execution-only vehicle. The administration sets the direction, the quality, and the pricing, so we get as a council to influence that. It's a big beast, so it might be that any kind of scrutiny would need to be quite honed around specific areas. I don't know if you have thoughts on what those areas might be. I know, for example, anecdotally, that the events work is doing phenomenal stuff, and the soft stuff around it as well. So the profile that some of those people coming to Colchester at various venues and the cross-fertilisation between Charter Hall and the Mercury, that seems to me all very good on the soft front. But you're probably more of a forensic man, so you help us out, Mr. Chilvers, if there's a specific area that you think needs looking at.
Issues about Mile End and some of the housing. Councillors will know about this project far better than I. And it isn't a general criticism of what they do. Things do go wrong from time to time. I've had plenty of experience of that in my former life, and you had to go down, eat humble pie, say sorry, send the flowers, do whatever's necessary, put things right. But you don't hide behind a telephone that never gets answered, or the council spokesman. No, all I can say to you, to this panel is, look, councillors should keep chipping away. They know what to look for. They chip away. Your response, Chairman, is no surprise to me, but I think the issue does need airing. I'll leave it there.
Okay, and thank you for coming along. And I think, again, to reiterate, your point about people owning things is absolutely spot on. And I don't like seeing a spokesman said, or a spokesperson said, personally. I think it should be from an organisation, and if possible, a political person who's responsible for that area, is my personal view.
Of course, we don't know who that is, do we?
Okay, we are moving on to item 7, decisions taken under special urgency provision. I see none. Item 8, cabinet or portfolio holder decisions called in for a review. At this early stage of the municipal year, thankful to say we have none. And item 9, items requested by members of the panel and other members. And we do have one such item that was brought to our attention from Councillor Willits under 9A. We have a climate emergency proposal, which has probably been circulated to all, but just in case it hasn't, Councillor Willits, would you just like to explain your thinking behind this so that the panel can have a view on whether or not this should be included within the work programme?
Thank you, Chairman. I bring this proposal to have a work item on the climate emergency because members will note that it is now 5 years since the council passed its resolution that we would have a climate emergency, and we had an excellent debate in the council chamber identifying the many areas which the council could make a positive contribution to mitigating the effect of climate problems. So next month will be the 5th anniversary of that particular resolution. Now, since then, many good things have been done. If we look back over the last 5 years and look at the climate emergency plan and programme, there has been a constant stream of activity, and some of that activity has actually obtained awards from national organisations that we have done it particularly well. The issue I have, and I'm not a, Chairman, I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool green, I'm just an observer of what is happening. I think we all subscribe to green issues, but I don't go over the top. On any project, you can draw enthusiasm lines on it. There will be a sort of a minimum level of enthusiasm, and there will be a maximum level of enthusiasm. And what the council appears to have been doing is bubbling along at the minimum level of enthusiasm. So any environmental project which will make a profit, which will cost in, gets done, and gets done fairly quickly. Any project which is financially neutral, and there are lots of them, get done sometime. But any project which requires significant investment or disrupts the way council does its business does not see the light of day particularly quickly. And so therefore, the climate emergency, as it was discussed 5 years ago, was really the upper line on our enthusiasm for doing things. And there have been very few projects which fall into that particular category. If we look at the agenda for Cabinet tomorrow, we have the vehicle transition strategy. And it's now taken us 5 years from the time we had the declaration of the emergency. And emergency to me means, we've got to get up and do things quickly, and we've got to see results, and we've got to make a real difference. It's taken 5 years to get to the point where the council now has a paper before Cabinet seriously considering a vehicle transition to make a rapid move towards forms of propulsion which do not damage the environment. And there have been good arguments put as to why that should be, but it is disappointing that for an issue which was declared as an emergency by a unanimous resolution of the council, we have not seen greater action, greater enthusiasm for some of the more difficult projects. I don't want to champion any of those specific projects. I did read today, Chairman, that Siemens now have an electric train which is running in a whole series of electronic trains running in Germany. They're just setting up a factory to manufacture electric hybrid trains in Yorkshire. Yet we are struggling with the possibility that we might have an electrically operated refuse freighter at some time in the next 3 years. Now, my adherence to climate emergency does not mean that we go overboard and spend megabucks on things which are not necessary and which are not proven. But we should have, I believe, a better methodology, and we're seeing one develop in some of the papers that are now going to Cabinet, to consider some of the more difficult decisions, the more structural decisions on climate emergency. So I believe it would be useful, Chairman, at this stage, not to get in the way of Cabinet or the environmental panel on the work they're doing, but just do a touch base on what could have been done under a climate emergency, what has been done under a climate emergency, whether we think that the process and procedures we have in the Council for considering and prioritising schemes is satisfactory, is in the interests of the taxpayers, and in particularly in the interests of limiting damage to the environment. So my suggestion is, as recorded on the paper, is that we have a work item to look at what has been done, what could be done, the methodologies that are being employed at the moment, and we make recommendations to Cabinet on whether perhaps they should be stepping up a gear, whether the time is now right to step up a gear, and whether we should be giving a bit of enthusiasm to them to look at this problem, perhaps in a new light. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Willits. It seemed quite clear what you're requesting. Is there any views around the room, wild enthusiasm or concerns that this is not the right thing to do? Let me see if there's anyone wishes to say anything. Okay, go for it, Councillor Law.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I think it's really important to keep a focus on how we're tackling and working as a council, you know, to deal with the climate emergency. And it can also be, it occurs to me, through what might be perceived as kind of smaller scale items. For example, I found it very helpful with some of the work that's come out from the Officer Ben Plummer around sustainability and heating solutions, which can often help, you know, people make their homes more energy efficient, and also that helps tackle, you know, climate emergency things. And that's a way of sort of tapping into existing funding streams. And it's just, it occurs to me as well, you know, we all have our part to play. For example, at my council as a vice surgery, I try and make sure that I disseminate that information. Some of these schemes around environmental issues or sustainability or schemes that require funding applications, it can be quite jargon heavy and quite difficult for residents to unpick. So I think it's incumbent on us as councillors to help disseminate that information and sort of work with the officers.
Councillor Smalls.
Yes, I'd be generally supportive of Councillor Willett's proposal that this is something that should come to scrutiny. And I like the way you referred to sort of increase the enthusiasm. And also, sort of in recent, well, I don't know if it's even recent years, it's come to light some things we might have been doing that we perceived as being green. And I don't know if the council, but companies will pay a lot of money to so-called greenwash. You know, there's been tree planting schemes and such that it now turns out perhaps weren't as good as we may have thought. So I think there's definitely room to scrutinise it.
Okay. Councillor Appleton.
Totally agree with the sentiment there, and I think it's very important that this panel does share any concerns with the chair of the Environment and Sustainability panel. I think we do also need to be mindful that we don't really want to duplicate the work that they are doing. They are there to monitor the progress that the council is making. So whether it's a slightly lighter touch than other things we might look at, simply because it's already, that job is supposedly already being done, but totally agree with your sentiment.
Okay. Well, I'm enthusiastic about this. Councillor Rowe.
Yeah, I'd just like to throw my weight behind it as well and say, look, I think it's an excellent idea to review our projects that we have as a council. It would be good to know you know, sort of a cost-benefit analysis from the different projects, and ultimately what price the council puts on the climate, since we have you know, a climate emergency.
On the point of duplication, I mean, I don't know if Councillor Willits has a view, but, you know, would it make sense if the chairman of that panel, as well as appropriate officers, joined us, because they probably do have quite intimate knowledge. I mean, as Councillor Smalls has alluded to, there is some discourse emerging around greenwashing, and I've got some very, very real concerns around the sources of some of the metals that go into the batteries, for example, and what happens to those batteries when they're finished after 8 years. And we've had some very eloquent presentations in recent months in this place and elsewhere, where people have drawn attention to that and said that actually, yes, you might be tackling bad air quality in North Station Road by cycling your electric bike, Darius, but actually, do you know how that thing was made? And I didn't know how that thing was made, really. And now I'm starting to think about that entire process, rather like in the way that someone pointed out to us that those bananas weren't fair trade 20 years ago. And so then you look out for the fair trade sticker, and it gives you a little bit of comfort that you're buying a product that's morally and ethically appropriate, not just so-called greenwashing. So I just wonder if within the realms of the discussion, if we could touch on some of that stuff as well, just because it's good that we are informed as much as we can be. And no doubt, you know, this is a process that will evolve over time as technology changes, as understandings develop. But the thrust of what Councillor Willits is proposing feels entirely appropriate. And lovely that you found a 5-year anniversary of something to put a hook on it. So, I mean, I don't detect anyone that doesn't want to do that. So I think we should do that. We should consider carefully how we don't just duplicate what another panel does. I do take that point. But perhaps we can invite the chairman of that panel to come here as well. And perhaps within the forum and with Councillor Willits, we can hone some terms of reference and some particular points to look at. But I think it's great. And I don't see any dissent, so we're gonna do that. That's unanimous, I think. Thank you, Councillor Willits, for giving us work so early on in the municipal year. Brilliant. That's what we're here for. Right. And at this point, we'll move on to item 10, which is the work programme for the municipal year 24 to 25. And our Democratic Services Officer and clerk for this evening has circulated the details of the dates and the various topics to be discussed. And just for the benefit of those listening at home, would you mind, Owen, giving us a little rundown of the fun that we've got in store for the year?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think most of it's laid out as in the report, so I'll take it as read. We do have a couple of suggested, requested amendments, one of which I'll lay out and one which Lucy Bredman will raise. The first one is that, having spoken to our finance team, they've let us know that the budget strategy for the 2025 to 26 council budget, which had been down for the panel to consider on the 12th of November, that's actually going to Cabinet on the 10th of July. So Finance have asked if we can amend our work programme for the panel to consider it on the 9th of July and make recommendations to Cabinet for when they give it the go-ahead or not, as the case may be, on the 10th. The second item has to do with the new waste strategy, which was again to do with the 9th of July meeting, and I'll pass over to Lucy Bredman to give a bit more of the detail.
Yeah, so just simply, I've been told by the head of service today that the new waste strategy won't actually be ready for that date. So, but what they've said is, if you'd like to pre-scrutinise that, which I'm sure you will, it's a very important strategy, that would be the 8th of October, that scrutiny panel meeting. So we can just manoeuvre that around if you're happy to do that.
Okay, panel members, Councillor Rowe.
Can I just have one quick question? How long has that strategy been in development for now?
So it's been in development for not that long, because it's actually linked to the 21 Environment Act and the Essex Waste Strategy, and the Essex Waste Strategy is going to Cabinet as planned in July. So they're all linked, and then ours feeds out of the Essex Waste Strategy. So, you know, it's been in development for some time, as with the waste strategy, but not finalised until those decisions have been made. Okay. I'm not the head of service, so that's me kind of off the top of my head.
Thank you very much.
It all sounds on this waste strategy front. It all sounds entirely reasonable, and I you know, depending on what happens in weeks' time with the general election, I anticipate that the direction travel changing much, regardless of what happens in the election. I know there's some very clear dates, aren't there, around when we will have to be having glass collected or food waste collected and all that stuff. It's being done nationally. And actually Colchester is ahead on some of this front, although I don't, as you can tell, waste food anyway. So there's no need to have a food waste bin in my house. Okay, but going back to the finance meeting, so I just want, for the purposes of the record, put it on record that within that meeting, it might be that visiting councillors would want to have a view on some of the detail, and we've had discussions in this place and elsewhere around some of the information that has been made available. Now, I understand that in particular, Councillor William Sunnox, and this happened very recently, made the point that he would like access to some of the appraisals within some of the capital business plans. I think it's right that we as a panel take a view that all councillors should be able to see that level of detail, but it might be worth this panel or me stating that where there is commercially sensitive information, that would need to be seen in private, but that it should be seen by councillors. And I think that that's right to state that. And it might be that that we need that note going across to the relevant officer team, so that when they do come to that meeting, should a visiting councillor come along, then we have all the information to hand. And we are, as Scrutiny, we're entitled to ask for that. But as I say, if it's commercially sensitive, we just have to go into private session. I'd rather not. I'd rather everything be out there. But I do recognise that you have to be realistic with that dimension. Is that fair, Mrs. Bredman?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. The one thing that came out of the review work that we did was actually, if officers can get a heads up in the briefing, the chair's briefing, so that they know what information either panel members or substitute members coming along would like to see, questions they'd like to ask, it's much easier to get that information in advance and just do the checks that are needed around confidentiality. So I think that's all I would urge the panel is, if you know in advance, and I appreciate you won't always know in advance because sometimes it comes up as part of the scrutiny, the more we can get that information for you in advance, the better. And I think the better scrutiny you'll be able to do as well on the night.
Okay, thank you, that's really decent. Councillor Willits.
Chairman, we like to think of ourselves, the scrutiny panel, as sort of the champion of the people, making sure that the processes and the decisions and the way things go is done in the best possible way. That is a laudable aim. But I think we have to accept, and I'm not sure that every councillor has accepted, that there are certain issues that cannot be done in public. And when we look at the capital programme, I mean, there will be assumptions in the capital programme about how much we're likely to have to pay contractors to get the work done. And if that is known generally, the contractors, we know all too well what will happen to their bids. You know, none of the bids will come in below the minimum that we're prepared to pay. So I think there are good reasons, and if we're going to scrutinise the capital programme and perhaps go just into a little greater detail than we have in the past and have sight of the appraisal or the business case rather than just a bland summary which enables us to add up the sums and say the capital programme looks as though it's okay, it's within the prudential bounds and so on. If we're going to look a little deeper, I think we have to accept that we'll have to have private sessions to do that. And we'll have to find some way of ensuring that we don't throw out our amazing public, have them running in and out all the time every time a member asks a question on the capital programme going into these areas. So I think there will be a work structuring issue on perhaps garnering together all the questions that members have to enable proper scrutiny of the capital programme and deal with that as a Part B issue in a way that is sensible for us and our time management, and also members of the public who may be here for other things.
Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to say, from my perspective, I think it seems often that we request, not necessarily from this panel, but as councillors, request information and are often told that we can't have access to it due to confidentiality reasons. I would like to see a little more faith in the councillors and allowing us to be able to view some of these confidential documents so that we can scrutinise them properly across the council. I understand that there are privacy and confidentiality reasons, some of the reasons that Councillor Willits already pointed out. But I think if we ask for these documents, it would be, I think it would make for a better council and for better decision making if we were allowed access to a number of these documents. And I really don't understand why, as elected members of the council, we can't just ask for certain documents and be treated as adults, not to put that into the public domain.
Okay, looking around the panel for any other views. Councillor Willis.
Just come back on that, Chairman. There is an us and a them, and we are us and they are them. The law is quite specific that the scrutiny panel has the right, if it is minded to do so, as a group of members on the scrutiny panel, we are entitled to see any council document we want, regardless of how sensitive it is or in whose secret in tray it might be residing. We as the scrutiny panel have a legal right, as enshrined by Parliament, to look at those things. Councillors who are not on the scrutiny panel do not have that right. They only get to see things if there's a good case and the officer who is custoding that particular item of sensitive information believes that it's in the interests of everyone for that councillor to see. So I mean, there is a I hope I got that right, Owen. That is the way I understand it. So we are privileged if we have a reason to look at any business case because we believe that there are issues that we would like to satisfy ourselves that everything is in order and in accordance with Council's financial regulations, we can do it. But unfortunately, some of our colleagues who would also like to see it don't quite have the same powers as we do. But of course, if they're a substitute member of the panel, then they inherit these marvellous powers, which are draconian powers even, that we have.
Thank you, Councillor Willits. Okay. Well, look, I think if the panel is minded to accept the suggestions as are in the report around the dates, I'm happy, I'm content. And it is all sounding very reasonable. It is worth noting that we had 3 extracurricular meetings of the scrutiny panel last year, and we had some extremely long meetings. And I'm going to have to be better this year to make sure the meetings are tighter. We know how we can do some of that, but we've all got to muck in. And I think that, you know, there are opportunities at the briefings. We're all pretty amenable people, so if there needs to be conversations had in advance, clearing anything up, getting better understandings, then pick up the telephone. If you need me as your chairman to find information from officers, I'm happy to do that and to be that conduit during the year. It is worth me also finally pointing out that within the paper tonight, you've seen that we do anticipate a further report on Community 360 and on the Middle Mill Weir situation. Both those items were instigated by this panel, which just goes to show how useful this panel can be. But they weren't instigated in a unhelpful fashion. They weren't instigated with any kind of prejudice either way. They were simply instigated because we saw them as issues that needed to be looked at. We've had last year, for the benefit of members that are new, we had an initial report on both areas and very useful presentations, some of which were done in the public domain, some weren't. They are ongoing challenges, or ongoing situations is probably a better word. We are alive to them. I, as your chairman, want to see a positive outcome in both those areas for all sorts of reasons. And I look forward to your assistance this year in helping scrutinise that and anything else that comes along, because there no doubt will be things that come along. Middle Mill came out of nowhere, and it just so happened that the leader of the council was here that night, and he looked across the room and he saw that people were really bothered about that historic site and also the very practical access in and out of Lower and Upper Castle Park. And so very quickly, he pressed officers to move to do something temporarily with the ballasts in the river to support the area to prevent further erosion. And frankly, you know, we did have some quite extreme weathers last year that no doubt impacted on that structure. So an initial undertaking was made really quickly. But if us as politicians had just gone straight to the local newspaper and slammed the council for not looking after it, would he have been as inclined to pick up the telephone as quickly as he did to get stuff done? I don't know. But I think sometimes we have to think carefully about the outcome that we want and how effective we can be as a scrutiny panel, rather than just bashing the administration because they happen to be a different political colour to me, for example. That's not the business that I'm here for. So that's my assurance to you for the year ahead. Okay, sorry about that waffle. Councillor Willits.
Chairman, it's a shame Mr. Chivers has gone, unless he's asleep or back. No, he's not with us anymore, because one of the work items really addresses the issue that he was bringing up on 3.6, use of council assets by community groups, where we were in the position that the Colchester Commercial Holdings, or its events company, were told to go away and extract the maximum they could out of any organisation using council assets, which was a sort of direct command to them from their owner. They then went away and did it so punctiliously that community groups, charities and others, kiddies groups, were wilting under the strain of having their pocket money taken off them in their entirety by the events company, so that they could use, in fact, the council's assets. And as a scrutiny panel, we stepped in there and said, let's have a report and let's have a look and let's see how this is working to ensure that there is a right balance between the events company maximising its income for the benefit of the council so that we can provide public services, but at the same time ensuring that those community facilities are available on realistic terms to charities and community groups and young people's organisations. And I think that sort of demonstrates that I think the worries which Mr. Childers had, that there was no scrutiny or sort of lack of independent view on how well or what was being done, is a good concern, but it's one which we are already addressing to a certain extent whenever that sort of issue comes before us.
Well said. Thank you for reminding us of that very, very useful piece of scrutiny. Okay. Yes, do we have another?
Yes, I'm not quite sure, being a newbie panel member, so I'll take guidance from the Chair. This is something I know I discussed with Councillor Willits at the Chair's briefing, something I'd been interested and wondered whether it fitted with the scrutiny panel's remit, was around looking at the fit between events, which I think we all agree are very important in terms of generating income and soft power and all that, but also making sure that minimising any environmental impact and also impacts on residents. You know, for example, I know that there was the Music in the Park Festival on the 4th of May, which for various reasons, I know lessons have been learned. I've seen a response about sort of how sound systems are used. But with previous events, I know I've had communication from residents about impact on travel plans and people being able to get about the city. So I just wondered whether something about like around that would fit in the scope of the scrutiny panel, Chair.
I mean, I think probably when the relevant portfolio holder comes here, we could do it then, because sometimes indeed, for example, Colchester events officers have come here as well. So it might be that we do it on that. The very specific point about like access to Lower Castle Park in the setup and de-rigging times, that's kind of a perennial thing that we're all alive to. But I think you're right that it's still discussed, because residents, and particularly new residents, who think in the autumn, isn't it great, I live next to Castle Park, and then suddenly the summer comes and actually there's quite a number of weekend activities that maybe are ticketed, maybe involve, as I say, pre-set and de-rig time. And I think it is probably right that as we are the custodians of that site, that we try and shape it a little bit to say that actually, if you're not going there to see DJ Tiesto and Judge Jules, or whatever it is that's going on, but you actually just need to cycle through to get to see your grandma in Riverside Estate. Maybe actually 5 days of not being able to do that might be a bit inconvenient. And I think that's right that you've highlighted that.
If I may come back as well, I know that something that Mr. Chilvers mentioned was about sort of impact on residents further afield. I mean, you know, I'm in North Colchester and I've had residents contact me with sort of noise pollution coming from events. It's something, you know, to be alive to. And, you know, thank you for your amenability and look forward to
let's
discussing
do that when the portfolio holder comes here, and just make sure, given that we have the annual churn that we do in Colchester, make sure that the portfolio holder is alive to it, and doing that every year is absolutely fine. It's something we've got to manage and live with, because we all want great events in the Castle Park, but we also need to make sure that it's not wrecked and it doesn't prevent people from getting from A to B where practically possible. Okay, thank you. Owen, you had something else to say, I believe.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. It was just to suggest that Councillor Willett's item that he wished to add and that panel have approved on the climate change emergency. I was going to suggest that we schedule that in for the 12th of November as we're shifting the budget strategy out of there. That would leave us with, I think, a good opportunity to go over it in detail if members are happy.
Councillor Willits, are you happy with that suggestion?
Yes, absolutely, Chairman.
Good. I think that's a good idea. Well done, Owen. Thank you for that idea. Right. Well, I hate to say it, but that might be coming to the end of our time together tonight, which would be almost a record for scrutiny. I don't think it'll be like that much more, but you never know. Okay, thanks guys, thanks for your time, thanks to the members of the public for coming along to have your say, thanks to the guys at home listening. We're sorry about the video technical issue tonight, but it's a good job because I didn't iron my shirt. With that, safe journey and take care.